Hi, I'm Lauren Manners and this is my directing unit vlog. So for my directing unit I knew I wanted to choose a script which I didn't have any visual references for, so that I wouldn't be influenced to develop the characters off that or to shoot it in a way which was the same as the original. So I went for a radio play or a theatre play. So before I go into the original scripts, a quick summary for my scene is a mental health patient and a therapist is talking after the mental health patient has decided to stop taking his medication and the therapist is trying to convince him otherwise. Now the first play, a radio play called The Shining Heart, is about a young boy who, from the scene I chose, seems to sort of be this thoughtful, absent-minded kind of character. He's chosen to come off his medication because he feels like it's getting in the way of his quality of life. He feels like he's not experiencing things. So a line which sort of illustrates that is, it's like they're taking my reality and replacing it with another, one which is coherent but empty. So that's sort of referencing back to how he feels when he's on medication. But I did sort of get this idea, especially when looking at the therapist character and what he says during this scene, that the patient may not be as innocent as we think, that they may be capable of a lot more. So I sort of got from the play that there's this hint, this subtext, that this character might not be as innocent as he seems, especially when you look at the therapist dialogue. So one of the therapist lines are, it's a very powerful medication you're being prescribed. Cutting your dose could be very dangerous for you, bearing in mind your illness. So I kind of liked the character dynamic. I liked that on the surface he was this big innocent character, but there's this little hint that he might be something darker, that there might be something more, which is then when the play 4.48 Psychosis, originally a theatre play, came into mind and I decided to adapt from. This play is literally the darker side that I'd wanted from the first script. So the main character sort of embodies this negative emotion and all this hatred and anger. She's just angry at her situation, and then the fact that she has a mental health problem brings that out. It heightens everything and makes her very, very dangerous. This play is literally the darker side that I wanted from the first script. So it's about this woman who genuinely embodies negative emotions. Like she takes all of this anger that she has at her situation and pushes it out into the world. But that's all just part of her mental illness. Her mental illness literally heightens these bad feelings and makes it into something way more. Now that sort of anger is just how I wanted this subtext to be pushed forward in my script. So I sort of started pushing the two together, the two ideas of having two characters. It then developed onto having one character with two separate sides, so schizophrenia. So I then started putting the two scripts together by lifting my favourite lines from the two existing scripts and trying to work out a coherent story. At which point I then jumped in and was writing my own segments to really link them all together and create a structure. So to me the most important thing to focus on was finding an actor that could pull off having two completely separate characters that are still one, that shows a complete variation of emotion and character development through the entire script. So after auditioning several people, I met Ben Fox. I'd actually worked with Ben on a previous project where he played this childish, light-hearted guy who was full of jokes and never really took anything seriously. So when I first auditioned him I was a bit sceptical. When we actually sat down and went through the script together, he turned out to be fantastic. He really had a very good idea of how he would portray that second character and how he could link them in. We then jumped straight into rehearsals, having met several times to talk about the character development and who this character really was, giving him some backstory, giving him a name even. So the day before we started shooting, we met one last time at my house to go through the entire script, really break it down, get an idea for what we were going to do. However, it was at this point where I found out the guy who had got to play my therapist couldn't make the shoot, and at such last minute I really struggled to find anyone. So Ben had the fantastic idea of bringing out the schizophrenia, making it more so and turning the entire script into a monologue. At this point, I then took that idea further. What happens if this entire scene was just that he was saying things out loud? Just to reassure himself of them, to have this conversation. Of course, his mental illness meant that he'd created this therapist character. However, I really wanted to emphasise the idea that this was going on in his head, so what I did was break up the script. It brought out all of the lines I thought were really, really important and that they had genuine emotion and feeling behind, and then make everything else a voiceover. So me and Ben jumped right onto set. We quickly sat down, ran through it, made sure that we were both completely on the same page, and just started shooting.
Right, take it back. Okay, and action.
Where's my fucking yellow paint?
So all of the bits which would be the therapist or the thoughts he was saying internally, I ended up reading over so that Ben not only could reply, could also react to what was being said as if it was going on in his brain. This actually turned out to be really challenging because as he'd learned the script that he would say all of his own sections and nothing else, when it came to actually shooting, we ended up having to break it down into various sections so he could really get the idea of what he was meant to be saying and what he wasn't. This meant that our edit kind of got a bit messed up because we didn't have one long continuous shot like I'd originally planned to be cutting back and forth between. Now, bearing in mind this new alteration to the script, I had very, very limited time to change the set, but what I ended up doing was, instead of making it on this 180 shot, turning it round so it was all facing one direction. I then wanted to bring out the idea that it was now more of a theatre play, more of a monologue, by giving him spotlight and then having it all facing this way. Once Ben had got the script into his head and was starting to really, really get the hang of what he was saying out loud and what he was going to have to react to, it went amazing. We paused the shoot several times to sit down and sort of go over what was happening and what we thought the character would be feeling, but because we'd rehearsed this character and we developed this character so much, it was quite easy. We then met on another day and did the voiceovers. So the first lot of voiceovers were really easy. It was just him speaking as his character was, so reading out the rest of the script. However, the second part was a lot harder. We actually ended up pausing the voiceovers and doing a massive rehearsal where we tried to create this other therapist character and really develop him. I'd sort of had the idea in my head that I wanted to bring out influences such as Donnie Darko, the rabbit in it, where he had several different layers of audio sort of going over to create this muddled and dark, scary sounding voice that was clearly imaginary. As soon as we wrapped the voiceovers, I sent everything straight over to Michelle and left her with the footage to really get her head around it and work her magic. Now, I'd shot it so that it was going to be a very, very simple edit, but Michelle had this fantastic idea of taking it one step further. She started adding all of these cutaways and snaps between different layers of the shot, between close-ups and long shots and everything, which really made it confusing to watch and really made it sort of angsty. Which worked fantastically with the therapist voice playing over the top. She then also made this fantastic soundscape, which was just perfect. When she showed me this different edit, it was not what I was expecting at all, but sitting down and going through it, we made a couple of adjustments which I felt really, really heightened the way it worked, and I feel like now, because of this edit, because of this different creative outlook, it's made the scene exceptionally different and involves the audience a lot more and really, really makes it a lot more uneasy. After this stage, I then went to my colourist, Dean, who we worked on several sort of different ideas. The first idea I'd had was to keep it really, really monotone because we'd shot on the Blackmagic and I absolutely adore the look the Blackmagic gives the scene. But then we were trying to play around with colours because I absolutely love using colour schemes to really reflect the subtext. So one of the options we chose was using sort of pinkish and reddish hue to really bring out sort of the anger and the underlying bubbling emotion. Another way we tried colouring it was exceptionally yellow, which really highlights the sort of topic in the monologue about this yellow paint, about seeing everything in this yellow. Now, I absolutely loved it, but it completely took away the dimension and shadows. I then settled on this dark, yellowy, grimy look that you see in the final film.
What happened to your arm? Cut it.
So for my critical reflection, I think the most important thing for me to talk about is the lack of the therapist character. Now, this actually really, really disappoints me because I'm not very keen on the idea of doing a monologue, but at the time I couldn't think of another way of creating this therapist without just putting in one of my friends, who, of course, there's going to be a massive, massive age issue with that one, so I think it really would have taken away from the scene. So I think the choice to shoot it the way we did was sort of, it wasn't what I wanted, but it worked better than any other option I had at the time. So if I was able to do it again, I'd definitely try and find another character for a therapist, or potentially if I can edit this one, add this second character, even if it is just a silhouette, so you're still playing on the idea of it being this like schizophrenic character, this other identity who's not really there. One benefit I think it gave me was a lot more one-to-one time with Ben, which I think really worked, especially with this whole developing the character, because with such a personal and involved character, it's really difficult to completely understand what's going on. But because he had my undivided attention, because we were both very much on the same level and on the same page with what we wanted from this character, I think not having anyone else there to worry about definitely made my job easier and made it a lot easier to communicate with Ben on set. So another thing I really liked about this sort of issue, which ended up changing this project, was then the way we shot it. Shooting it all from one direction, I think it was definitely challenging, especially because in my normal film work, I'm a production designer. So I think it really gave me the opportunity to make it a lot more theatre-based and seem a lot more like it is a monologue being presented to an audience. A lot like the film Bronson, when he's doing all this theatre stage monologue to an empty audience. It really plays on the whole idea of a mental disorder, which I think just works fantastically for the script. I'm also insanely proud of the script because I'm really not a script writer, but I think this sort of really pushed me and created something which is completely new from something which is already existing. I think I did so much work in the pre-production stage, especially when it comes to this script, that a part of me thinks it's a shame it didn't go the way I'd originally planned, but it really did push me and it really did develop my skills in sort of contingency plans and in very quickly coming up with new ideas and very quickly rewriting sections, which is something I've never had to experience on another projects. Other things I think this project managed to give me a great insight on is working with the various different people involved in a project. So up to this point I've only ever been a producer, a production designer, or involved in the camera, so I've never really touched editing very much. So although I already had great relationships with the other departments, this was the first time I was really brought in and involved in the editing process. So sort of sitting down and realising how much one creative idea can completely change a project was really eye-opening to me. I'd sort of never really thought about it that way. I thought it was just we gave them something and they made it how we'd shot it. But I've sort of seen that there's this whole other side to it, that there's so much more in editing. So I think it's sort of given me the idea that in further projects, in my own projects in the future, I really want to be involved a lot more in the editing because there's just so much more potential in there than I've ever thought to give it. So I think the things that I'm taking away from this project and that I'm really going to improve on in the future is my communication skills with all the various departments, in particular the actors. I also think that if I could do this entire project again, I would definitely focus on the actors and on having this two character and making sure that everything goes to plan, because it was just sort of such a mindless issue that ended up changing everything. I think it would have been so easy to solve, but I just hadn't really thought about it properly and I hadn't had the experience to know it was something I needed to do. So that's it for my directing vlog. Please follow the link in the description bar to see the full film.